6 monsters and bosses, rank 39 Havoc, and naturally, this happens to be on the exact run I'm finalizing my Ciaphas Cain build. True to the lore, no matter how hard Cain tries to stay out of trouble, trouble always finds him anyway. Today, we find out if the lore-accurate loadout of Ciaphas Cain, hero of the Imperium, actually holds up in Darktide. This all started from the comments on my Crit Commissar video. A lot of you pointed out how much that build resembled what Ciaphas Cain used. So I figured, why not just make it actually him? I did some research and consulted a friend who was familiar with the books and stumbled into my main challenge. Cain's loadout is a chainsword and a LASPISTOL. That's it. And if you've spent any time in Havoc 40, you already know where this is going. Half my early testing felt like being Hawkeye in Age of Ultron, surrounded by heavily armored enemies, holding a weapon that frankly had no business being there, and somehow expected to contribute. Except Hawkeye had trick arrows, I had a motorized sword and a flashlight. But after a lot of testing and adjusting, I found something that actually works, and it does it without cheating the theme. First, I'm going to show you exactly what we're working with. Feel free to pause and take what's on the screen and run with it. Now, to tie this into the lore, for those who want to learn a bit more about Cain, for melee, Cain is a skilled swordsman, his skill described not as trained precision, but as habit and intuition. His chainsword is so battle-worn that an opponent in a duel once backed down just from looking at it, so the chainsword it is. For ranged, Cain's weapon of choice is the LASPISTOL. He is noted to be accurate well beyond its effective range, accurate enough to have sniped an orc warboss with it. And here's the detail that surprised me after my friend revealed it. Most images you see of Cain carrying a bolt pistol is complete propaganda, made to make him look more heroic. In the actual books, Cain respects the bolt pistol's raw power, but finds the ammo scarcity makes it unreliable in the field. My in-game testing backed this up completely. On high Havocs, when I was running with a bolt pistol build, I was constantly running dry. The LASPISTOL in this build, however, never starves for ammo, and that is by design. Let's start with the LASPISTOL. For perks, we're taking Carapace and Maniac damage. The Carapace perk here is because this build actually allows the LASPISTOL to deal with crushers. Not instantly, but enough to take one on from range without needing your chainsword. If Cain could gun down an orc warboss with a LASPISTOL, you can handle a crusher. Maniac damage covers your priority threats, mutants, flamers, trappers, and especially ragers, because of how fast they can close distance and how much punishment they dish out if you let them reach you. For blessings, if you watch my Crit Commissar video, you'll notice Desperado is gone and Dum Dum is in its place. Here's why. In this build, your crit rate is still very high, and Dum Dum rewards you for that with up to 30% extra damage at close range. In Havoc, you're going to find yourself surrounded far more than you'd like, and when that happens, Dum Dum turns your LASPISTOL into something that punches well above its weight at the ranges you're actually fighting at. Ghost remains on the build, it's the backbone of the survivability loop, and I'll tie that together when we get to the talent tree. Now, for the chainsword. The chainsword's job in this build is simple. Clear melee threats fast so you can get back to shooting. For perks, we're running flag and unarmored damage. This is specifically for Havoc, where the Mobian 21st show up in force. Their bodies are flag armored, but their heads are unarmored. So instead of picking one, we cover both. Maximum damage regardless of where you're hitting, which is exactly what you want when you're trying to clear a horde in seconds. This also has the benefit of covering both Scab and Drake melee enemies too. Both blessings are Cleaved Focus, Wrath, and Savage Suite. In Havoc 40, the Mobian 21st hit mass reduces your cleave so much that without any cleave investment, you're barely cutting through 3 enemies at a time. These two blessings together solve that problem, letting you tear through even thick clusters before they become a bigger problem for you. For Curios, we want one of each stamina, health, and toughness for balance. For perks, prioritize combat regen for ability refresh, stamina regen to keep Deadshot running, toughness for survivability, and 1 gunner resistance as a fallback. Now, the combat loop. This builds directly on the Crit Commissar foundation. How it worked in the original build was like this. Deadshot gives us 25% extra critical chance while aiming down sights at the cost of stamina. With our base 10% crit chance, the LASPISTOL's 15%, and opening salvo, we're sitting at around 60% crit chance before anything else kicks in. The more crits we land, the more Shock Trooper activates, which means our shots consume no ammo. Because we're not spending ammo, opening salvo stays active longer, which keeps our crit rate high, which keeps Shock Trooper firing. This is the basic loop that sustains itself. Ghost is what completes it. Landing weak spot hits activates Ghost, which makes you immune to range attacks for a moment, and crucially, it counts as a dodge. That triggers Reciprocity and Duck and Dive, and Desperado on the LASPISTOL if we are running it, which stacks your crit chance towards 100% while restoring stamina that Deadshot is burning through. The whole engine becomes self-sustaining as long as you are landing your shots. However, unlike the pure crit commissar in Ciaphas Cain's version, we don't hit 100% crit chance here. Instead, we're trading some of that ceiling to invest in talents that actually fit the character, and one in particular. We are picking up Voice of Command's Revive talent. Only in death does duty end. I know some people see this node as a tax, something that only pays off if someone goes down or gets wasted when inexperienced players hold their ability waiting for the right moment when using it early would have prevented the down in the first place. Fair arguments, but for this build, this node is not optional. Cain, unlike every other commissar in the Imperium, actually made a point of being decent to his men, not out of nobility, but because he figured that if he treated them well, they'd be far more willing to pull him out of trouble when things went wrong. It was pure self-interest dressed up as leadership to ensure his own survival. That logic applies perfectly here. I use this ability to keep my stronger teammates in the fight, because when they're alive and healthy, they're solving problems that would have otherwise landed on me. My Martyrdom Zealot can fight with more zeal, my Ogrin can better pull the attention of a dozen crushers, my Psyker can blow himself up with his own ability, and I can pick all of them back up instantly without breaking my own tempo. It makes them braver, or more reckless depending on how you look at it. It even works through walls and across floors. Against the Battle of the 6 monsters and bosses, this node came in clutch. I pulled our Psyker back up mid-fight while he was getting wailed on by the melee twin without needing to worry about having space. When your teammates know you can do that, they play bolder. And when they play bolder, you stay safer. We're also investing further into the melee branch. We pick up Desperado for that flat 10% melee crit chance and 25% finesse damage. The Chainsword has a high finesse multiplier, so these are meaningful buffs to its damage output. We are also taking Agile Engagement. Since the LASPISTOL is doing most of the killing, the melee damage buff is almost always up when you actually need to draw your sword. And if you are mid-melee and a Trapper for example appears, the range damage buff lets you quickly switch to the pistol and deal with it before it becomes a problem. It gives you a sort of weapon specialist playstyle without needing the actual keystone, since both weapons switch pretty quickly as well. Finally, Onslaught. Critical damage scales extremely well with Brittleness, and this is how the LASPISTOL actually deals meaningful damage to crushers. We have Crack Grenades as our main way of dealing with them, but Onslaught means you are not helpless once they're gone. This talent also scales very well with the Marksman focus tree. Brittleness is also a team-wide debuff, so every time you apply it, you're making life easier for everyone around you. And thanks to Shock Trooper, firing at crushers barely touches your ammo economy when you're fully stacked up. One last thing, and this one depends on your team. You can swap Crack Grenades for Smoke if you want a more defensive playstyle. Against the 6 bosses, Smoke kept the perimeter clear of specials and gave us breathing room to actually deal with the monsters without getting more problems coming into the combat area. One thing to note with Smokes. The Ghost Loop won't activate nearly as much because ranged enemies won't be shooting at you as often. But honestly, getting free shots on enemies with no risk of getting shot back is something that Cain would be perfectly fine with. If you stick with cracks, the Ghost Loop runs at full efficiency, and you can even consider swapping Dum Dum back to Desperado for extra crit chance and ammo sustain if you wish. Tailor this to your team. In the Battle of the 6, we had no taunt, no bubble, so Smoke was invaluable for creating cover and controlling the perimeter as we advance. So, after all is said and done, how does this build actually stand in Darktide? Is it worthy of bearing such a heavy title as the hero of the Imperium, or is it only good in lore? I think what sold me on this build was the outcome of the battle against the 6 bosses that I showed at the start. We survived, completed the mission with only 2 downs total, 1 Zealot who took on a little too much armor at once, and 1 Psyker who got cornered and paid for it. But we pulled through, and when we sat down afterwards to talk about how, nobody really had a clean answer. Each of us had our hands full with a monster of our own, each of us assumed someone else would handle the bigger problems, and somehow everything just worked out. Which, if you know anything about Ciaphas Cain, is a profoundly lore-accurate outcome. The smoke grenades helped more than expected, not just by keeping gunners at bay, but by effectively neutralizing the ranged twin. He spent most of the encounter standing in the smoke, occasionally throwing toxic grenades into the void, and never really threatening anyone with his weapon too much. A human commissar outwitting a chaos champion with a smokescreen and sensible positioning. This is something Cain would approve. This build is not meta. It is not going to outdamage a plasma gun or a bolt gun veteran or outbrawl a zealot or ogrin. But that's not what Cain does. Cain survives. Cain keeps his team functional. He finds himself in the middle of a catastrophe and walks out the other side, slightly confused about how he managed it. And on Havoc 40, in the endgame of Darktide, that turns out to be more than enough. So, that's it for the Ciaphas Cain build. Let me know what you thought about this build in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Varlets.